is non-existent. The evidence for that is non-existent.
No, look, if you go for sufficient length of time, you're talking about change within a species. If you take the change within a species and then just produce that for a bit longer and a bit longer and a bit longer, at some point, imperceptibly, they will gradually become so different that they can no longer interbreed easily, then they can no longer interbreed at all. At that point, they're different species. This happens all the time. What's the problem with it?
Okay, we will, Jonathan, if you want to provide an answer to that, we will give you a few moments on the other end. Meanwhile, for those who want to hear Professor Dawkins speak tonight in the Seattle area, he'll be speaking at the University of Washington at the Heck Edmondson Pavilion. Doors open at 7 p.m. We'll be right back with Richard Dawkins, the best-selling author of The Greatest Show on Earth. 21 minutes after the hour on the Michael Medved Show. In his last bestseller, Richard Dawkins wrote about what he called the God delusion, attacking religion in general and evidence of God in particular. His new book, The Greatest Show on Earth, is not an attack. It is rather an exposition and a defense of the science and the evidence behind Darwinian evolution. Evidence which has not persuaded Jonathan from Poulsbo, Washington. Jonathan, your last point to Professor Dawkins.
Yes. Well, my objection to the theory is that no mechanism has been demonstrated that would produce, certainly not natural selection and mutation, has been demonstrated to produce the new species and organs and body plans required by Darwinian evolution.
Well, I'm sorry, but that's just wrong. I mean, when you say you're a biologist, are you a professional biologist? Are you at a university?
I am a professional biologist trained at Berkeley.
You're trained at Berkeley?
Yes, trained at Berkeley.
I taught at Berkeley.
Did you encounter Professor Dawkins when you were at Cal Berkeley, Jonathan?
I think I went to a book talk by you there once.
Okay,
yes.
but did you actually study biology at Berkeley?
Yes.
And you came out thinking there's no mechanism to go from a common ancestor to chimpanzees and humans?
Well, there are speculative mechanisms. I'm saying that there is no demonstrated mechanism that can do that.
Well, I'm shocked at my old university.
Okay, what's the best, if you were to try to counter Jonathan with reference to specific chapters in your book, which chapters in The Greatest Show on Earth should he consult first?
Well, I think the chapter on comparative molecular genetics, showing the comparative evidence, comparing each species with each other species, looking at the same genes in different species, because we've got a digital code here. The genes are actually digital. You can compare them letter by letter, word by word. And if you look at humans and chimpanzees, they're very, very similar indeed, just as, say, mice and rats are very similar to each other. You've got a beautiful hierarchical pattern of similarity, a hierarchy just like a branching tree. It is a branching tree. It's a family tree. The only alternative to a family tree, when you look at it this way, is that God deliberately set out to deceive us in the most devious way you could imagine.
Let's go to Todd in San Antonio, Texas. You're on the Michael Medved Show with Professor Richard Dawkins.
Yes, good afternoon, gentlemen. I have a biology educational background, and I am also a Christian, and I believe in design, but I believe in an old earth, and I'm open to the possible truth behind the theory of evolution. I think that people should have an open mind toward intelligent design and toward Darwinian evolution, and be willing to look at the evidence. And my own faith doesn't rest upon whether God did it instantly or whether he did it over eons of time. I believe that ultimately life originated from God.
I'll tell you where Richard Dawkins disagrees with you is he thinks that if you have an open mind, the evidence is already so overwhelming, as he puts it. Evolution is not a theory; it is a fact of life. And Professor Dawkins?
Well, I'm all in favour of open minds, obviously, and of looking at the evidence. And as Mr. Medved said, I think the evidence does point overwhelmingly in one direction. Of course, you know that any respectable bishop or priest would agree with you that evolution is true, but they would say something like God did it, which I take it to be roughly your position, that you think evolution is right, but you think that God perhaps had a hand in starting it off, or do you actually think that God controlled the actual direction that it went in?
I don't presume to, speak for God. I I think there's, in my opinion, overwhelming evidence that there's intelligence behind the design of the universe and the way things function. And I mean, I'll admit I have bias in that direction, but I don't presuppose to know whether God, had his hand in the entire process or whether he started the watch and let go.
The Blind Watchmaker, by the way, is another book by Richard Dawkins. Let us go to Bruce in Seattle. Bruce, you're on the Michael Medved Show with Professor Dawkins.
Well, thank you for taking my call. First of all, Dr. Dawkins is Bruce Chapman from Discovery Institute calling. And
right.
I was frustrated with this conversation because most of the time I hear straw man arguments about intelligent design. Your new book apparently doesn't really deal with intelligent design, but it seems to me that in your previous book you said it's a question of science, that it is a scientific argument. I congratulate you for that. But if it is, how about having a debate with Stephen Meyer, who is the author of another new book, The Signature in the Cell, which deals with this question, and have this in a respectful, civilized, scholarly fashion where you look at the scientific arguments pro and con.
Now, when you say that I don't deal with intelligent design, I do, because I deal with creationism, and, of course, intelligent design is simply another name for creationism.
Well, if it's another name for
creationism,
why do you distinguish between creationism and intelligent design very early in this program?
I don't.
Hold on, Bruce, hold on. You did, earlier on, when we were talking about the Holocaust denier analogy, you said you applied that analogy to old Earth creationists. Intelligent design advocates are not old Earth creationists.
Sorry. I applied the history deniers to young Earth creationists.
I'm sorry, to young Earth creationists, yes. But you know that intelligent design advocates are not young Earth creationists.
I do. And that was the distinction. That was precisely the distinction that I was making. That's why I said that I was not accusing intelligent design people of being history deniers in that sense.
But you just said that intelligent design is another name for creationism.
It is another name for creationism, but not for young Earth creationism. Bruce
Chapman?
In that case, you've got an argument with your previous caller also, because that would be a theistic evolutionist proposition, which is also at some point, by your definition, if it's not Darwinian evolution, it is creationism in some fashion. There isn't any other kind of evolution as far as you're concerned.
Where do you guys think that? I mean, do you think it was God did it?
I don't know. I don't think that
that's what you say. You always pretend. You always pretend it might have been an alien from outer space or something.
Well,
but you know very well that what you mean is God.
But I think that was your line and expelled. But I think the thing that you really ought to consider in all seriousness is that there is, by your own definition, there is a scientific argument. Put that scientific argument to the test, not with somebody who's, a straw man that you bring up, but have somebody like Meyer, who has written a very scholarly book, to actually debate this topic with you, or just have a discussion about it.
All right, the proposal's on the table. Response from Professor Dawkins. Thank you, Bruce.
I will have a discussion with somebody who has a genuinely different scientific point of view. I have never come across any form of creationism, whether you call it intelligent design or not, which has a serious scientific case to put. The objection to having debates with people like that is that it gives them a kind of respectability. If a real scientist goes onto a debating platform with a creationist, it gives a kind of respectability which I do not think that your people have earned.
We will be right back with Richard Dawkins, the author of The Greatest Show on Earth, The Evidence for Evolution, and more of your calls.
The Michael Medved Show. MichaelMedved.com.
34 minutes after the hour, and I should say that Richard Dawkins' new book, The Greatest Show on Earth, it's based upon a T-shirt that he was given in which evolution was described as the greatest show on Earth, the only show in town. And in Seattle tonight, the only show in town with Dr. Dawkins is at the University of Washington at the Heck Edmondson Pavilion, doors opening at 7 p.m. for those listeners who are interested in attending. Will there be a chance for questions?
Oh, most definitely,
discussions?
yes. Yep. Yes.
in your lecture tonight?
Yes.
All right, that's tonight at the University of Washington.